I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency! Thanks, losers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. I am your host, Bob Lung of Big Guy Fantasy Sports. I want to welcome my good friend and also co-host of the show, Ron Rigney. Ron, in both cases, you're in Florida, I'm in Ohio, and both of us are going through some thunderstorms here, hoping that we don't have any power outages. But other than that, how's it going down there?
Pretty good. I'm heavily caffeinated, so that's always a positive thing, especially at 7 in the evening. Other than that, a little bit of light rain left over, but we're inching closer and closer and closer to the beginning of training camp, which is always exciting.
It is, and I was just thinking, I think it's a month. It's either exactly a month. I think it's either. Well, anyway, a month from today, it's Pro Football Hall of Fame weekend in my town, and so I'm excited about that. It's hard to believe it's only a month away already, but very excited to drive Brian Dawkins around and get to see all of my friends, Hall of Famer friends that I see every year, and hang out with those folks a little bit and drive Dawkins around and his family, and the pleasure of meeting him. And hopefully I get to see, I don't know, they have their Super Bowl rings yet? Probably not. He probably doesn't have one yet, but he'll have it at some point. But I've had a few on before. I had Cortez Kennedy's on once, and yes, it was about I could have put 2 fingers in it. It was so big.
I would say you probably hula hoop with that thing, couldn't you?
It was pretty big, man. It's always cool to, those guys are usually really nice about it. Like, yeah, here, go ahead. And, wow,
that's awesome.
Okay. And, so it's pretty cool. So
I got to rock a couple of Red Sox World Series championship rings one time. There were a guy that worked in the front office, and that was pretty cool. I got a nice picture with those on. Even though they are Red Sox, they were still pretty cool.
Yeah. Last year when I was working at an accounting firm up in Cleveland, one of the guys, I forget if it was his father or his uncle, worked for the Cavs, and he let him bring in his championship ring, and we got to put it on, take some pictures and that, so that was pretty cool. But that hence is long gone, because the king has left for LA, so I wish him well. No hard feelings. You won me my championship. Do what you want, buddy. I'm perfectly fine with that. Now we'll just wait for the Indians to pull one off someday in the near future. Pitching staff-wise, I think they're there. Offense, I think they're there. It's just a question of can they hold off the Yankees and some of these super teams. So we'll see.
I'm telling you what, from from an offensive standpoint, they've got 2 of the best young guys to build around. The more you dig in those numbers, the more you watch those guys. Yeah. I mean, you saw what Lindor did last night. I mean, Ramirez and Lindor are unbelievable.
The thing I love about them is that they seem to have fun playing. Like, they are always joking around. They're always, pitching balls into the stands and the crowd. You just get that sense that, they do it without the money. They just enjoy doing it. They enjoy doing it for the fans. They're both super cool people when you see them out there, and they're always joking around, and they're just enjoying what they're doing. And there's certainly a lot of great players I assume do enjoy what they're doing, but there's a lot of them out there that just seem to kind of have a burr up their ass or a chip on their shoulder, and you kind of go, really, dude, calm down. So that's what I think is great about them, and that's why the fans love them, and just a lot of fun. So hopefully the Indians can put it all together. I just saw Salazar went out for the year, so that's not good. But we've got the Biebs, so maybe he'll Bieber fever, and Bauer's been on fire, and obviously we have Klubat, so should be and Carrasco. So I think we've got a starting 4 that could pretty much hang with most of the teams out there. But anyway, we're talking football. We're supposed to be talking football, but it's still baseball season, and I'm still competitive in my fantasy league against you. I think I'm second place, but anyway. So this week, let's take a look at the news and notes. Not a lot going on this week. Pretty slow week. Training camp, as you mentioned, is coming up in a couple of weeks. If there's one big news that came out today, Aaron Jones, running back in the committee in Green Bay, will be suspended for 2 games, which I didn't understand because I thought the first offense was 4 games, so call me crazy. But he's out 2 games. I wasn't a fan. In fact, if you looked at my tier draft list, he wasn't even on it anyway. I have Jamal Williams like 33 and Ty Montgomery at 44. I didn't have Jones on this list. I don't think Jones is that good of a running back. I mean, he certainly had his moments when nobody else was around him to do that, but when Jamal Williams and him were both on the field, Jamal Williams was definitely the better player, and Ty Montgomery's the better receiver. So, the funny thing was I just heard 2 days ago about how Aaron Jones had bulked up so that he would be better in pass protection. Well, the only thing he's going to be protecting is his wallet because he's not going to get paid for the first 2 games.
I think it kind of sounds too like we know exactly how he bulked up as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I shouldn't say that. I didn't see exactly what he was suspended for, so I don't want to jump to any conclusion just yet. But
yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. It just said for violating the substance abuse policy. Now it could be anything, I realize, but didn't seem like there was any fight. But I think this will definitely move Jamal Williams up, which I already had him up anyway. I'm sure I had him much higher than most ADPs. I had him at 33, and I think he was floating around the 40-ish spot. It just depended, what kind of league you were in and the scoring. But, yeah, Jamal Williams, 38th, I'm looking at here. So, like I said, I have him about 5 spots higher. Probably will move him another 5 up. Certainly, put him up there ahead of the Ronald Joneses and Royce Freemans, but a lot of people would argue with that as well. But that's really the big thing. I mean, how much of effect? It's only 2 games, so not a ton, not a huge effect. But do you think this will knock him out of favor in Green Bay, and we'll basically see mostly Williams and Ty Montgomery?
Well, that was one of the takeaways I was going to bring up. Is it's not so much that it bumps Jamal Williams up for the fact of he's probably going to be the lead dog for the first 2 games. Now, Ty Montgomery's sprinkled in there, and I'll kind of get to my thoughts on him in a second. But I like it because not only will it make Jamal Williams more valuable those 2 games, but if he does have a good showing in those first 2 games, it definitely could be a situation where he becomes the lead guy and becomes the head running back. And not to say that Aaron Jones would be sprinkled in a little bit, but Mike McCarthy seems to me like a guy that something like this happens, another guy steps up and plays well, he's going to reward that guy, that next man up kind of mentality. So I think that makes him, intriguing anyway. Like you said, we had him a little bit higher than Aaron Jones anyway. For me, Ty Montgomery, I don't really want to take him anywhere because I don't know necessarily. I mean, he's listed as a running back. I've read some things where they're going to get him a little bit involved in a slot receiver at times. He's going to get some catches out of the backfield. And so, to me, I think it kind of shakes out, and especially after Aaron Jones gets back, I don't know if he's going to get enough meaningful touches fantasy-wise. I mean, if he's getting, 7-8 carries a game and he gets 4 or 5 catches a game, is that really enough for me to want to draft him? Not necessarily. Plus, if he's getting carries, I'd like to see him, be that more kind of scat back guy because he doesn't really have the body size, the body type to be durable as a running back. He's built more like a slot receiver, and so I'm not really a big fan of his anyway. But I don't think he's going to get enough touches that it's going to make him all that fantasy relevant. Now, maybe first 2 games, just because of process of elimination, he's going to step up and get a few more. But I don't think I'm going to take him anywhere. But Jamal Williams, for sure, I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to in my drafts.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the guide, Fantasy Football Consistency Guide, he had 6 clutch games out of 16, which on the surface you go, 38% didn't do much. Problem is that he got all 6 of those over the last 9 games of the year. So that's 67%, when he was mostly the starter during that time frame because Aaron Jones was out. So like I said, I like this kid a lot. I've been picking him in a lot of drafts as my running back 4 or 5, especially in these deep best ball type ones where you've got a deep bench. And like I said, I'm excited about getting some of those guys now because they're certainly going to move up a little bit. But I still think there's people who just aren't excited about the backfield as a whole, and I get that. Mm-hmm. But, as I've mentioned to people, it's like, well, do you want that backfield, or where they're going to score a lot of points? There's going to be a lot of opportunities to score touchdowns because they're going to be down in the red zone quite a bit. Or do you want to take a chance with somebody like the Lions or the Colts or whoever that you don't know what you're getting, and you don't know if their offense is going to be good enough to get that many chances in the red zone. So, like I said, I'll always take somebody late that plays for the Packers, the Saints, the Patriots, or somebody that is going to score, because there's always that opportunity that they could, come in and fill that role and be the player that, gets you some great value player-wise.
Well, too, and like you mentioned, you're drafting him as your RB4. I mean, when you're drafting guys as your RB4, there's not a lot of risk there, I don't think. I mean, you're going to take a bunch of guys and just kind of see what sticks and what doesn't. And those are some guys in that vicinity that you're drafting as your RB4 or your RB5 that could get dropped for guys off of waivers or because of injury anyway. So I think it's a fine guy to take a shot on, especially if you're getting him as your RB4. I don't know if you're going to be getting him as your RB4 anymore with this going on. Right. But nonetheless, that's still pretty good value, I think.
Yeah. Like you said, it's just a question of where you get them when. I was just looking here. I was in a draft. So I was just in a draft. It's the FanX, what they call the FanX analysis draft. And it's, a number of the top experts, yourself and Colby are going to be in one of the FanX drafts here in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be starting soon. But this one's always held really early. The idea is that we will write an analysis about every guy we pick, and then they kind of publish that and share that with the public so they can see, where the experts are drafting and why they like them. And, I got Jamal Williams as my RB5. After I take that back. I probably got him as my 4 because I took LeGarrette Blount, I think, after him. But I have Marvin Gordon, Jordan Howard, Mark Ingram, and then Williams is my 4th. So, maybe he fills in a flex in some weeks. Maybe, I trade him for something else. Maybe, who knows? That's, at that. But like you said, that may not happen here in the near future. We'll see. Scott Fishbowl's pretty deep. That'll be starting soon, but he may move up a little bit on that. So we'll just have to wait and see. So one other news, not the most exciting news, but I think still something to take note, because I'm definitely one of those guys that believes that when it's contract year, there's always that possibility that somebody's going to give that little extra effort, or maybe not miss as many games injured this year because of that. And the guy we're talking about is Stefon Diggs. Definitely a guy that I really like, and I have him, very highly rated in my ADP, or in my tier draft list. I have him at number 14. But, if they don't sign him to a long-term deal, he could become a free agent at the end of the year. So definitely keep an eye on that. If he does get signed, certainly that's not a bad thing. And it doesn't mean he's going to suck. It just means that, if he's... those guys always seem to make a little bit extra effort when they're kind of playing for a contract versus not. Not everyone, but I'm just saying there are certainly players who have done that in the past, where they kind of break out that contract year and then they get the big money, and then you don't see from them again, hence Joe Flacco. What are your thoughts on Stefon Diggs? You think they'll get him signed, or you think he'll just kind of wait it out and see if some team will show them the money in the offseason?
I mean, I think it's the smart thing to do is lock him up. I mean, I don't know if they can. I don't know when Adam Thielen's deal is up. I would imagine Adam Thielen's deal is pretty friendly to the salary cap there. But the Kirk Cousins deal is huge. But also, when you sign a guy like that, you would hope that the team is going to take care of him and keep the weapons that he builds chemistry with. And so I think, it's one of those things, maybe they'll kind of see where the chemistry's at with Kirk Cousins and Stefon Diggs, and maybe that'll kind of be the determination there. But, I mean, you have to have weapons for these guys. We've talked about it with young quarterbacks. We've talked about it a lot of times when we talked about quarterbacks in general. And these guys that you pay all this money to, it's a tough job. There's only a certain handful of guys that can get it done. They've got to have people to throw to. So my opinion is I think they might just kind of see where him and Cousins and Thielen and all that kind of shakes out and go from there. But I would hope they would, just for Cousins' sake.
Yeah, I would too. And for the Vikings' sake, I mean, like you said, if they can lock them both in, they've got Dalvin Cook, for probably 4 years under a rookie contract, so they've got their running back set. If they can lock those two down, and I don't know if Kyle Rudolph has already been signed. I thought he might have been signed to a multi-year, maybe a year or so ago. But definitely think that'll be a good thing for everybody there in Minnesota. So, like I said, not much else out there. We keep an eye on it every day. Obviously, we'll be updating the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide here this weekend, getting a new updated version with the Aaron Jones situation and that kind of stuff, and Jameis Winston's suspension from a week ago. But if you haven't had a chance to get that, you can get that on Amazon. If you're a printed copy kind of person, you got to have that hard copy. You got to be able to write notes in it, and I get that. I'm the same way. You can get that off Amazon. When you get that, make sure you look on the inside cover. There's a little intro there that I wrote, and in there it will tell you what to do if you buy the book and how you can use your purchase of the book to get an upgrade, to get the VIP for only $10 more to get all access to the Big Guy Fantasy Sports website, all of the consistency tools, all of the articles, all of the DFS articles that Ron and Colby will be writing, the Standard League articles from Josh Brickner if you're in the Standard League, and all the other goodies that go along with it. And that's only $10 more if you buy the book online. If not, you can just, for $20, buy everything. You have all access, get the updates, the Excel file for the tier draft list. Again, all access to the site all season long. And that's available for only $19.99. So try to keep it reasonable for everybody. We want to help out, make a little money, but certainly won't be quitting our jobs anytime soon, and that's fine with me. So make sure you check that out. The book's been doing well, and I'm expecting it to continue. So thanks everybody who's bought it so far, and thanks for all the kind words and what your thoughts are about it. So, Ron, anything else before we move on to looking at the ADPs?
Well, real quick, I looked up Adam Thielen, and I must have missed this in March. Adam Thielen actually signed an extension in March, and he is under contract until 2020, and it's a pretty cap-friendly deal. He'll make $3.85 million next year, and then in 2019 and then 2020 he'll make $5.3 million. So I think that's pretty solid value for what he gives them. So maybe it is something that they could get something done with Diggs. I also real quick came across the line just now that Julian Edelman's 4-game suspension stands because he lost his appeal, so he will definitely be out 4 games.
Gotcha. Actually, I thought he had already appealed it, but okay.
I thought so too.
Yeah, I thought they had went through that and already had talked through that, and that wasn't even an option. But yeah, okay. Like I said,
I guess it's official now. So
official.
Yes.
All right, so this week we're going to kind of break down the ADPs for wide receivers. At the end of the show, we're going to break down, we're going to kind of get into the xConsistency information that I wrote for the guide this year that you can also find on Big Guy Fantasy Sports website. But as we take a look at the current top 12 wide receivers, and this is ADP-wise, and this is based on about 5 different sites, everything from Football Calculator to RTS to MFL to all the experts, online. So, it's a pretty good consensus. I feel that it's a very fair one. Obviously you and I have our disagreements with these numbers of who's where and how high. The number 1, number 2 is Antonio Brown and DeAndre Hopkins. This year I took the step of moving Hopkins to number 1 in my rankings because in my mind, after you put together a perfectly consistent season like he did, with basically garbage quarterbacks for half of the season, and Antonio Brown was about 70 some percent, 75% or more. I just feel like Hopkins is on the way up and Brown is on the way down. Now that doesn't mean Brown falls beyond number 2. He's still one of the top receivers easily, but I just feel like he had his years of 100% consistency back to back. That was certainly his peak, and I just think that his peak is done. And if anybody wants to argue, I'll show you the numbers. Like I said, 79% consistent last year, nothing wrong with that. But that ranked him 8th, and that's not number 1. And Hopkins, like you said, was perfectly consistent at 100%. Where do you stand on the who is number one at wide receiver this year from your standpoint, Ron?
Well, I think I'm with you where you got to give the slight edge to Hopkins just because I think of the way the trends are going. I think, like you said, Antonio Brown, not to say that he's not going to justify being a top pick, and you still could go with him over DeAndre Hopkins if that's your preference. I think it kind of comes down to like what we talked about at running back a lot of times is just okay, some of these guys are close enough that it kind of comes down to preference. Me personally, I think Hopkins is trending upward. Like you said, he did this with garbage quarterbacks last year, and not only was he perfectly consistent, he was tops in total points as well. So he did both of those last year. So I think that's pretty important. And he does have Will Fuller on the opposite side, that's going to help him a little bit with that, but there's not a lot of tight end options there. They don't look like they're going to spread the ball around a whole lot. Our guy PB&J Miller might get a few catches here and there. But Antonio Brown's got a lot of guys he's got to share with too. Not to say that he's not going to get his, but Juju Smith-Schuster's coming on. Lev Bell touches the ball an insane amount of times through the air. And the uncertainty with both of them, one of the things that I look at with Antonio Brown that scares me off almost every time is when something happens to Ben Roethlisberger, he becomes very pedestrian. He can still have a nice game here and there, but DeAndre Hopkins had nothing but pedestrian quarterbacks last year and still put up those numbers. And to me, that's kind of the deciding factor right there.
Right. No, I agree, and that's kind of where I'm at. And we know Watson will be back, and he's healthy, and it should be a fun season if they both stay healthy. It'd be amazing to see what kind of numbers they'll put up together. The guy at number 3, not one of our favorites, Odell Beckham Jr. I just cannot put him number 3. As you know, on our tier draft list, we have Michael Thomas number 3, and Julio Jones is number 4, and Michael Thomas is number 5 in the ADP we're looking at. I have it as Thomas Jones, Thomas Jones, Keenan Allen, then Beckham. I have him 6th overall, and here's exactly why. The last two seasons, he's been 75% consistent. Nothing wrong with that. It's a very good number. It's a very solid number. But that tied him for 9th last year and 6th in the year before. So at the highest he's been is 6th fantasy wide receiver, and that's where I have him ranked. I think he'll be right there in the top 6. Don't have a problem with that, but that's not number 3 in my mind. And Michael Thomas, who's put up back-to-back 80% plus seasons, is my number 3 because he deserves to be the number 3 because that's what the numbers play out of where he's been. And, he was that high last year on, a year that was Drew Brees' lowest numbers in yards and touchdowns pretty much in his entire career. So if he can put up those kind of numbers, he was 88% consistent, 3rd overall. That's where he deserves to be ranked as 3rd. And so that's where I have him. Julio Jones 4th, Keenan Allen 5th. Like I said, here they have it Beckham, Jones, Thomas, Allen. I have it Thomas, Jones, Allen, Beckham. What are your thoughts, and how do you rank those 4 guys from number 3 to number 6?
I think if it's me, I'm going to go Thomas, Allen, Jones, Beckham, just for the fact that
Allen above Jones. Okay,
I am. I just like the fact that he has that rapport with Phillip Rivers. I've talked about it before, and oddly enough, I had both Beckham and Keenan Allen on one of my teams last year. I'd never drafted Beckham before in my life, and I was sitting there at 6, and I'm like, the guys that I had wanted at 6 had all got taken, and he was there, and I'm like, we'll take it and see what happens. Of course, you can't predict injuries. And he was okay before he went down, but I think that'll be the last time I draft Odell Beckham Jr. I didn't draft him in the past just because he has a little bit of a head case. But but like I said, we joke about Lamar Miller kind of being our PB&J guy. I think Michael Thomas is going to kind of be my PB&J XL guy as far as that, because he's one of those guys last year that, to me, he was what we talk about with this consistency stuff. I mean, he wasn't your top pick in the overall draft. You weren't going to pick him above Hopkins and Brown. You got him a little bit of a discount last year, but he was that guy that came out for 8 catches, 80 yards, a score just about every week. And it's one of those things too that we've talked about this before, that while it doesn't look flashy on your team every single week, you're going to look at his totals at the end of the year and be like, wow, he had a pretty nice season. And then when you look at our consistency rankings, holy crap, he was pretty good last year.
Right.
So
he was 3rd overall, right.
Yeah, I think so I think he's going to be a little more expensive this year, but I think you're going to get some nice value there. I mean, you can't argue with a guy like Keenan Allen that has double-digit catch games with Phillip Rivers in a PPR. Now, I might rank him. I think I might flip-flop him and Jones in a standard scoring. But as long as Allen is healthy, I mean, he's going to get the volume, he's going to get the targets, and not to say Julio Jones can't get that, but for some reason it just seems that Keenan Allen is more of a PPR guy, and I think I prefer Julio Jones a little bit in a standard scoring.
Right. And as you mentioned, Allen last year was third in total points, fourth in consistency, so no reason not to put him fourth. Like you said, I have Julio fourth and Allen fifth, but I could flip-flop them and be perfectly fine. But I think the interesting thing is, this year, in the past, I was never a fan of drafting late in the first round because I always felt like, I'm getting probably a top player, but it wasn't, I wasn't excited about where that spot. This year, I don't think I could be any more excited because right now, the leagues I've been in where I've been 8th and 9th, both the leagues I drafted Melvin Gordon 8 or 9, and then came around and got either Michael Thomas or Keenan Allen or Julio Jones as my wide receiver. So there's two guys that are 80% consistent, and I got them in the first 2 rounds. And so to get an 80% consistent player in the second round like Thomas or Allen, that is just amazing to me. But it's because of the push for running backs that has pushed those top receivers into the second round because there's 8 or 9 running backs going in the first round this year, and it's pushing them into. So now this year, to me, I kind of like being at the back of the draft. In fact, I think I just found out that for the Scott Fish Bowl, or no, it's not Scott Fish Bowl, the Pros versus Joes, I'm 10th. And I'm like, fantastic. That's where I can lock down my 2 big guys again. And if maybe Gordon isn't there, maybe I'm going to get Michael Thomas, and Julio Jones or Keenan Allen or one of those guys. So, locking those 2 guys down and then get, our guys like PB&J or, Kenyon Drake, Alex Collins, some of those guys later as my RBs 1 and 2, that's fine because I've got 2 80% lockdown wide receivers, and that's a good spot to be. So, I think that, when you throw in, I think the top 7, which is adding in AJ Green, I think that is the top 7 regardless of how you rearrange them. To me, I don't see anybody else coming up within that group. Even Mike Evans, I don't think is going to be there just because now of Winston being out 3 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you could have made an argument. Even though with Winston there, it's not even a lock for me either, but right. I definitely think you can't make that argument now.
Right. The only one Evans maybe could have beat out was AJ Green, and I don't know if I could have done that. Evans had 1 good year, but prior to that, as you know, he was my whipping boy for inconsistency. So it's hard to trust him on a 1-year basis. But he would have been close, but I don't think he'd have been that close. But that to me is my top 7. Like I said, rearrange them how you want. That's how they are, on my list. With Evans and 8. Now here they have number 8, Devontae Adams, and we've had this conversation before. Yes, he is now the number 1. Jordy Nelson is gone, but he's never been over 64% consistent. Granted, he was the wide receiver 2, but there are certainly wide receiver 2s that have been more than 60% consistent. Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs were a perfect example last year. Tyreek Hill has been that. Juju Smith-Schuster was that. Michael Crabtree has done it. So you can be the number 2 receiver and still be consistent, especially in a high-powered offense like the Packers. And to me, I can see Adams stepping up maybe to 75% consistent. That would be good, but that doesn't put him in that top 7. I don't even know if I can even put him ahead of Evans and Hill and Baldwin and Thielen and all those guys. I have him currently ranked 13th. Where do you think Devontae Adams should be ranked? Is it 8th? Is it 13th? Is it somewhere else?
When I look at, looking at 2 different lists here, because obviously we're both looking at the ADP and also our tiered draft list. And like you said, he's ranked 8th at the ADP here. I can justify him ahead of Evans. But see, there's a couple guys there too that, I might take Tyreek Hill above him. other than that, I think I might drop him down maybe a spot, but on the ADP here. When I look at our draft list here, I'm trying to see who I'd probably take him above Doug Baldwin. I guess I wouldn't take him above Fitzgerald and Thomas, so I guess I'd take those guys above Devontae Adams. But to me, he's one of the biggest questions, or if not the biggest question mark kind of in this top 15 is he going to make that jump to surpass those guys? Is he going to be more consistent and be a little bit more of a higher producer than Demaryius Thomas or Doug Baldwin? So I think as the offense as a whole, I like the Packers offense more than I do Seattle's, and I think that's going to affect him a little bit. So I definitely move him ahead of Baldwin, but I might have to think. I wouldn't be opposed to taking him above Fitz or Thomas, but I think I'd probably go with those guys above Adams just for right now. But at the end of the season, it wouldn't shock me at all if it shook out to where Adams was up around that number 8, number 7 spot, and he did justify that pick.
And I think the other thing that surprised me just as much as being the 8th wide receiver is that his overall is 18th. So that means that's middle of the second round. I mean, I might, if let's say I'm drafting first and I get Gurley and then I come back and get a Jordan Howard or, some other, good, consistent running back there. But let's just say for purposes, let's go with Gurley and Howard. So now I'm really set at running back. Now I'm looking at the beginning of round 3, and Devontae Adams is there. I'd be, okay. As a wide receiver 1 after I got those 2 studs, yeah. But the thing is, he's not. He's going in the middle of the second round. ADP-wise, guys like, Thielen, Hilton, Fitzgerald, Diggs, Baldwin, Tyreek Hill are all going at the beginning of the third round. Other than Hilton, I would have no problem with the other guys as my number 1, probably even over Adams. But Adams should be in that realm, I think, in that part of the of the flow, and not middle of the first round. But obviously, like you said, everybody's jumping all over him because he's the now new number 1 in Green Bay. But we'll just have to wait and see. So, all right. So as we move forward, the rest of the 12, as I mentioned, Mike Evans number 9. Tyreek Hill number 10, Doug Baldwin 11, and Adam Thielen 12. All of their ADPs are basically in the late second round. Most of them are in the early third. I think that's fair for all of them. Like I said, obviously we can't give any love to T.Y. Hilton until we see Andrew Luck throwing rockets, and we haven't. There's just no way I'm touching T.Y. Hilton at any point in the draft, and he won't fall far enough for me to even think about it. So, but Thielen and Diggs I think are going to be interesting because I kind of like Diggs a little more than Thielen. In fact, I have Diggs 14th, Thielen 15th. I just feel like Stephon Diggs is the receiver that Kirk Cousins really never had in Washington and wanted. He wanted Doxson, he wanted Crowder to be the big play guy. They used him occasionally, but it never seemed to really click well. And I can just see Diggs and Cousins clicking well in Minnesota. Not that Thielen will be bad, and I think he'll be consistent, but I think you could easily see Stephon Diggs getting into the top 12 in total points and consistency this year. After last year being, close, but certainly not, certainly not in that realm. He was 19th overall in total points, 21st in consistency. But if he gets 3 more clutch games and he's 12 out of 16, he could certainly get up there and be a wide receiver 1. Fitzgerald we talked about. I think he'll be on a lot of my teams because I think he'll be sitting there and could be my wide receiver 1 early third round if I've gotten 2 stud running backs. Or I might, go something like, who knows, Tyreek Hill and Fitzgerald, after getting Gurley if that Howard's not available, whatever the case may be. But, I think those guys, that's your top 15. Like I said, I think Fitz could move into the top 12 ahead of, Hilton or Baldwin and Diggs could move up instead of Thielen. What are your thoughts on the top 12 and who may you move out and may move in?
Well, I think you could make a case putting Diggs there instead of Thielen, and I think you hit on kind of the argument I was going to make too. Is I think Diggs is going to kind of be that playmaker as opposed to Thielen kind of being that possession guy that he plays that role. And I think that they're going to mesh well with Cousins, and like you said, these are what kind of caliber weapons that he's never really had, which I think is going to elevate his production as well. You touched on my guy T.Y. Hilton, and it's one of those things where, we have yet to see what the future holds for Andrew Luck. We've seen him throwing footballs. They're not necessarily real size footballs yet, but we're getting excited about that. But you can't trust him until we know that Andrew Luck is going to be back there, and that's just common sense thing. I mean, I don't think you're going to spend that pick on a guy where you don't know who's throwing him the ball, and you got to sit there and think about it. When you think about T.Y. Hilton is catching passes from Andrew Luck or Jacoby Brissett, I mean, it's a no-brainer which one sounds more attractive as far as where you're going to get him. And it's one of those things that if I could maybe get him as my wide receiver 3 late, possibly, just that's kind of my Colts fandom coming out as well. But nonetheless, I'm going to be smart about it, and I'm not going to take him where he's going. On a side note, I did want to include that T.Y. Hilton's real name is Eugene Marquis Hilton. So I wanted to throw that out there as well in case you didn't know that.
So there's no T or Y in his name.
There is no T or Y. I don't know the reason with the T-Y.
Maybe he said thank you a lot as a child.
Oh, wait, okay. Hold on. I did find it here. Hilton scored a touchdown later that day. His daughter against Joe is also known as son T.Y. Explain how he became known as T.Y. His dad's name is Tyrone. Oh, his dad's name is Tyrone, so ever since he was little, everybody just used the first 2 letters of that, which that's a little weird because I don't know why that would. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to call him Eugene Marquis Hilton from now on, I think.
Okay, Hanson.
Yeah. Easy now. Anyway, so yeah, I'd move him out for sure. Larry Fitzgerald, solid across the board. Well, one of the things too, I think that I thought about as you were kind of describing, you mentioned if you can get Larry Fitzgerald as your 1 in that 3rd round. One of the things that may not sound sexy when you think about it is Larry Fitzgerald or Stephon Diggs or one of these guys being your wide receiver 1. But what that does mean is you probably set yourself up really well at running back. So you're pretty set back there too. So that's something that you got to think about that as well. And you mentioned a little bit earlier picking 10th in the draft. One of the things that you have to think about too is when you're picking outside the top 4, top 5, you have to come to terms with the fact that none of those running backs are going to slip to you. You're not going to get any of those top 4. So you're going to have to figure out a solid base for your team, and there's nothing wrong with coming away with 2 of these solid receivers and then grabbing some running backs later on. I had to do that in one of my MFL 10s where I took Hopkins number 1 overall, and I've come back and I've been able to get Drake. I've been able to get Alex Collins.
Right.
I had Ronald Jones, who I like a lot this year. I might have overpaid for him a little bit, but it was one of those things that we talked about a little bit last week. It's not a reach if you really want the guy, and I was afraid he wasn't going to be there when it comes back. So that means you've set yourself up pretty well. But I think Diggs is about the only guy that I could really make an argument for maybe being in that top 12. But, once again, when you get to that point, you're kind of splitting hairs there.
Exactly. So as we move on past wide receiver 15, number 16 is Amari Cooper. He's pretty much in the same boat as T.Y. Hilton. No, I take that back. So, obviously there's people that still love Cooper. He's wide receiver 16, which is actually the lowest I've seen him after his rookie season. He's always been top 12. So, there is at least a little bit of a degrade from the past, but I still say 16th is way too high, especially for a guy that was ranked 38th last year in consistency. There's no way he's on my team this year. I don't care. Now, the guy I do like, and I know you like as well, is Demaryius Thomas. Last year he was actually quite consistent with garbage at quarterback. He ended the year ranked 16th in total points, 69% for the second straight year, ranked 15th in consistency. So, right there at wide receiver 17 is a very fair, but again, that was with garbage quarterbacks the last 2 years. Now he gets at least an improved Case Keenum. Case Keenum is a good, solid quarterback. He proved that last year in Minnesota. He's not going to set the world on fire. He's not going to be a top quarterback, but he is going to make his weapons, productive, just like he did with Diggs and Thielen last year. And I can see Thomas. Thomas could break the top 12. I mean, I could see that happening. Especially if they get anything even remotely close to a decent running game, so that there's not a ton of pressure of them coming after Keenum a lot in passing situations. But I could see Demaryius Thomas being damn close to that top 12. Definitely can see him matching the 75 or the 69% consistency that he has in the past. If I can get him as my wide receiver 2, I'd be giddy. And even as a 1, I'd be okay with that because, again, he's a lot like Fitzgerald. You know what you're getting. It's nothing flashy, but it's going to be good enough. If he can be 70% consistent, you've got 2 running backs that are going to be 70 to 85% consistent. It's going to be just adding to that core that you're trying to build. I know you like Demaryius. What are your thoughts?
Well, it's kind of like what you said there too. Is Case Keenum's not going to make him into a top 5 wide receiver, one off the board, but I think he is going to make him really good, and he is going to make him a really good wide receiver too, I think. And when you compare, like you said, it's the same thing with DeAndre Hopkins that we talked about. I mean, he did it last year with terrible quarterbacks, and so Amari Cooper, I want nothing to do with, kind of like you. And when you look at these guys from a quarterback standpoint, as I kind of start with, we talked about T.Y. Hilton. I don't know about Sam Bradford with Larry Fitzgerald. Those QBs are kind of shaky for me. Obviously, Diggs is set up there. But I don't know if it comes down to quarterbacks. With the whole setup of the Raiders, with Gruden coming in, and with the way Carr played last year, I don't know if I wouldn't trust Case Keenum a little more than I'd trust Derek Carr. And so I'm definitely going to take Thomas above Amari Cooper, because I don't think I'm going to have any Raiders at all whatsoever on any of my teams. I want nothing to do with them. Like we've said, I just want to sit back and watch the circus. But other than that, yeah, I love Demaryius Thomas as a wide receiver too. And I'm kind of like you. If you get him as a wide receiver 1, once again, you've set yourself up pretty well at running back, and you're going to be sitting pretty, and I don't think that's all bad. If you compare him with a couple of other wide receiver 2-3 types, if you can get Thomas and maybe a couple rounds later, especially if it's PPR, if you can add like a Golden Tate or a Marvin Jones or a Jarvis Landry, I think that's a pretty nice start to your wideout core if you waited a few rounds to get those guys.
Right. Well, I found it interesting as you were talking. I was looking at this ADP overall, and as we talked about the first round being all running backs, this 4th round plays out to have 9 wide receivers drafted out of 12. So it goes number 37, 39, 40, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. In that order. So that just shows you that basically the 4th round will be a wide receiver run. So if it plays out that way, you better be on your toes, whether you're at the front, middle, or back. But we already talked about Cooper is 37, Demaryius was 39, Josh Gordon at 40, Allen Robinson 42, then Juju Smith-Schuster, Jarvis Landry, Alshon Jeffrey, Golden Tate, Brandon Cooks. The interesting thing is there's some in there that we like, and there's some in there we don't like. So I think what's nice is if you're getting to that round on a positive side, you're going to have your choice of some good, consistent players that we certainly are fans of. We've already talked about Demaryius. We have no problem with Josh Gordon, Jarvis Landry, Golden Tate, Marvin Jones. Are all solid guys that have proven that 65 to 70% consistency or higher in Jarvis Landry. But, the nice thing is that there's some choices there. Now, what you don't want to do is grab the guys like, Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffries, Brandon Cooks, who haven't proved it really well over the last year or so. But let's take out the guys we kind of liked already. But let's look at Allen Robinson, Alshon Jeffries, Brandon Cooks. Which of those 3 and why would you pick in the 4th round if you had a choice of all 3?
Oh, great question. I don't want any of them, but I had to pick one. No, I think you could make an argument for all of them. I'm not going to take an easy answer out. I mean, I'll pick a guy, but I mean, as much as we don't like Allen Robinson, he is going to be a number 1 receiver, and he has shown it in the past. I'd say probably of the 3, I'm just not an Alshon Jeffrey fan. I don't know why, and he's just not a guy that I target on a lot of my teams. I'd have to say, if I don't know, all things equal, I'd have to take Brandon Cooks, I guess, out of the 3, and then maybe Robinson, and then Jeffrey last.
Well, I just noticed that, and I guess I probably knew this and I just forgot, that Alshon Jeffries had a surgery in the offseason to repair a torn rotator cuff, which shouldn't affect him much. Yes, it does hurt probably when you're putting your hands up to catch the ball, but I got to assume he'll be healthy for the training camp. I guess if I had to pick out of the three, I would probably pick Jeffrey because, he is the number one in Philadelphia. I trust Nick Foles and Carson Wentz a lot more than I trust, Mitch Trubisky, because they haven't worked together. He's in his second year. I'm still not sold that he's that good. Brandon Cooks just has too many other weapons around him that they're going to use, where I feel like Alshon Jeffries and Ertz is pretty much all they got. They'll utilize, they're kind of like the Patriots. They'll utilize the other players to win football games, like Corey Clement. They'll have a little Ajayi every once in a while. I don't remember who they're, Aguilar. But, Jeffries is basically the guy there, and he's going to see more of the targets probably than anybody outside of Ertz. So I would probably lean Jeffries. But again, he was only 53% consistent last year. That's 28th. So that's a lot worse than 22. So, it's a hard sell to me for, like you said, for any of them. Yeah. But I just feel like Robinson at 3 spots ahead of Jeffrey doesn't make any sense to me. I just don't see the chemistry there because it hasn't. And at least Jeffries, I've seen it. Cooks is going to be in a new spot, but I think he's going to be just as average as he was when he was with the Patriots. He'll be good, but not, he'll be wide receiver 2-3, and I have no problem with that. But I guess if I had to pick, but again, I think they all have question marks, and we can argue till we turn blue in the face. But it's an interesting scenario how that is the entire fourth round of wide receivers.
Well, one of the things I want to point out too, real quick, about Jeffrey's season last year is he's very dependent on the touchdown as well, because his overall numbers, he had 57 grabs, 789 yards, but he had 9 scores last year. And that's up from 2 the previous year, and that's and 4 in 2015. So that's something there that I'm factoring in as well. But he's been nicked up a little bit in the past also. I mean, he's had 3 seasons where he's played all 16 games, but he's also had seasons where he's missed 4 games, he missed 7 games, 6 games. So that kind of makes my argument for me a little bit. But once again, I mean, you can argue, like we could argue this all night as far as these guys being so similar, and that's kind of where the beauty of this comes in, and that's where I think this illustrates another thing is if you get these guys right in this part of the draft, that's going to probably win your league for you, or it's going to definitely make a huge contribution to it.
Absolutely, because I think, again, this is probably going to be your wide receiver 2. It could be your third if you only took one. Let's say you took Gurley and then you went, wide receiver, 1, 2, 3 wide receivers. If they're your third, I guess that's fine, but you're probably going to be hurting at your running back 2. But, I've also been in drafts where I've been able to pick Landry as my, wide receiver 3 because there's not a lot of love for him. Everybody just doesn't really feel the love there and going forward. So, it's a little bit tougher. So, all right, well, I guess, believe it or not, I know this is surprising, but time is flying. Let's just take a look at the wide receiver 3s overall. So we're going to go from wide receiver 25, which is Marvin Jones, down to 36, which is Robbie Anderson. In that group that I know you're looking at with me, give me 1 or 2 names that you think could move up into the wide receiver 2 overall by the end of the year. Give me one you think could move up into the top 24 and one that, there's a lot of them I think, but one that you think will not be a wide receiver 3 at the end of the year.
Well, I'll give you my not first, and that's Robert Woods. I don't know if Robert Woods, we talked about Cooks before, Cooper Kupp. I don't know if he's going to necessarily be as successful as he was before, because when you give up what they gave up to get a guy like Brandon Cooks, and not to say Brandon Cooks comes in and, you said, kind of like you said, he's average, but he's average in a wide receiver kind of borderline 2-3 way, which isn't a bad thing to me. And I don't know necessarily if I think that'll impact his outlook a little bit. I'm not really optimistic about. Corey Davis is a guy that I like. I don't know if he's ready to jump up that wide receiver 3 yet. So those 2 guys are kind of right there at 30 and 31. Pierre Garcon's a guy you got to like in San Francisco with Jimmy Graves coming in at quarterback. We saw what he did for Marquise Lee last year, and I like both of those guys at wide receiver as well. But I think that Garcon's a guy that you could see kind of make that jump. If he has the whole offseason with Jimmy Garoppolo, he can kind of build that chemistry. I like the way that offense is going. They brought in McKinnon. I think they're going to do some big things, and I think they're going to be a little better than people think. So he's a guy I think that can make that jump into the top 24. But I think me personally, when I look at the two of them, I'm going to wait maybe and take Marquise Lee a little bit later on. But I still like Pierre Garcon at this point.
Yeah, I like Marquise Lee as well. In fact, I just picked him round 19 or something in the draft. I don't know why everybody's down on him, but anyway, so my picks, I know it's not saying much because he only has to jump up 2 spots, but I'm a Michael Crabtree fan, not necessarily for his boxing skills, but for his receiving skills. And, last year, even as bad as the Raiders were, and over the last 3 years, he's been 69, 69, and 64%. In the years that he was 69%, he was, top 12 in total points, 15th in consistency. So, he certainly can make that jump. And I think he's all they got in Baltimore. So I think that he's going to see a lot of targets. I think in a PPR, he's going to be golden and it will easily be top 24. The guys that I don't think is going to be top 36, if I had to pick one, I'm probably going to go with Corey Davis. I just don't know if that kid's ready. He just seems to be always injured, unfocused. He had one great game in the playoffs, but even when he was healthy, he just didn't seem to click. And I just don't know if he's ready to make that leap. So that's my guy there. So, all right. So our last kind of 10 minutes here, we kind of just want to go over xConsistency for wide receivers. And for those of you who don't know what xConsistency is, it's kind of the way of identifying the true consistency value of a player, kind of in the same way they use it in baseball for looking at xERA. And so the formula is simply this. It's the average fantasy points per game times their clutch rate. So a perfect, easily example is DeAndre Hopkins last year, who averaged 20.79 points per game and was 100% consistent, has an xConsistency of 20.79. And the fact that Antonio Brown was second in total points and actually not far behind, he's probably 20.4, but the fact was he only had 79% consistency, which dropped him down to a 17.40. That is probably the other reason why I have Hopkins ranked number one, is because when comparing these two in this xConsistency, you can see that Hopkins is about 3 points better, per game than Antonio Brown is based on, those numbers. The rest of the guys, obviously Jarvis Landry's in there. We've talked about his consistency over and over. The fact that he's, wide receiver 20, mid-20s just astounds me. That just because he went to Cleveland he's going to suck, but yet he had Jay Cutler as quarterback last year and nobody remembers that. But why don't you give us your thoughts on xConsistency? Maybe pick some wide receivers on this list that you were surprised to be as high as it was or as low as they were, whether it's in the first group or second group in this article.
Well, I think Odell Beckham's a guy we're going to dump on him a little bit more. Is here at number 6, and I mentioned last year you can't predict injury, but where you're drafting him, like I said, I got him at 6th overall, not the 6th wide receiver. And, when you look at what he would have contributed over the course of 16 games, it definitely wasn't going to be a payoff as to justify you taking him as a 6th overall player. So that's a guy that sticks out to me personally, the first part. And, he was consistent the games he was in there, but he didn't justify the high pick that you might have used on him. And so that's a guy that I think, as far as it's surprising a little bit, but at the same time, to me, when you kind of think about it, it's very justified. Another guy, too, Josh Gordon. We're talking about all the Cleveland wide receivers here. I would have thought for what he came in and did that he might have been a little bit higher. He was 80% consistent, but his xConsistency is only 9.20, so I would have thought he might have been a little bit higher up because he did come in and have some big games after the suspension was over with. But once again, Josh Gordon's also a guy too. You were talking about our MFLs. I got Josh Gordon as my wide receiver 3 in an MFL, one of my 2, and I think that's pretty solid
awesome
value. Yeah, so
awesome.
I'm pretty happy with that. So I think he's a guy that you'll see pop up a little bit as long as he can keep his head in the game. You know, he looks like a linebacker out there now. He apparently got a Bowflex in the offseason, and he's been working that. So, so we'll see what he does. But he's a guy I thought would have been a little bit higher on this list.
Yeah, no, I agree. And going back to your Keenan Allen, you can look at the rankings again, and you can see Keenan Allen's xConsistency actually put him ahead of Michael Thomas, 14.39 versus 14.22. Definitely had more points per game. Consistency was one game less than Thomas, but that was enough to xConsistency-wise put Keenan Allen ahead of Michael Thomas. So certainly justifies your thought from earlier. Like you said, some of these other ones, Devontae Adams being at ranked 13th, right there, but Marvin Jones being at 14th, and yet Marvin Jones right now, his ADP is a wide receiver 25. He's a guy I certainly love going into this year again. Hope to get on a number of my teams. Love to get him as my wide receiver 3. I think it should be pretty easy since he's already a wide receiver 25. Most people think Tate is the guy, and he is, and he's certainly good, but, Tate seems to be going higher in most drafts as well. So, from that standpoint, you just have to kind of say, he's either one of them I think will good. They got Kerryon Johnson, who's a new running back, but that's going to take time to develop. LeGarrette Blount's there. He'll be what LeGarrette Blount is, which is a masher. But I can see them with their defense, again, not being all that strong. I think they'll continue to give up points and have to score points. Like I said, last year they had to score, I think, 38 points to beat the Browns. So, and they had to come back from that. So I think that, that's certainly going to make Stafford and that passing offense be justified fantasy-wise, going into this year. So, Juju Smith-Schuster's in there, ahead of Brandon Cooks, which, may surprise some people. Not us, but surprise some people. I think the other surprise in there was Mohamed Sanu, who was right there at 24th with Chris Hogan at 23rd. Everybody's kind of forgot about Sanu. In fact, I think I drafted Sanu in the 17th round as like my wide receiver 5 or 6. I mean, yes, I know Calvin Ridley's there, but have we given up completely on the guy? I would tend to believe not. But that's the kind of things you want to look for in these, especially these deep drafts, these best ball drafts, is finding guys like Sanu, Ted Ginn, those kind of people that you can get super, super late and will have those games that can maybe pull you through in weeks where, somebody who you took a chance on, like a Calvin Ridley or a Cortland Sutton or something like that you think was going to be big and didn't turn out to be big, might be getting you through a few weeks of those games. So definitely something to look at. Definitely look at the xConsistency, especially if you're kind of looking at, comparing some people that are very close ADP-wise, and look at their consistency, their xConsistency, and see which ones will kind of separate themselves from the pack. So, all right.
Yeah, as we're real quick, and you mentioned Mohamed Sanu here, so I was kind of curious as where he's stacking up in ADPs, and there's a ton of guys here I would draft way after him. Like he's our 158th overall player off the board, 61st wide receiver, and you got guys like Mike Williams in LA, Deshaun Jackson, Michael Gallup, Kenny Galladay, Paul Richardson. There's a ton of guys that I think I would draft him above in that scenario. So he's a hellacious value right now. Right.
Well, and look at Ted Ginn. He's 7 spots after him, and we already talked about this. Ted Ginn last year was 34th in total points, 38th in consistency. He was basically a wide receiver 3 last year. He's getting zero love. Completely forgot about. I don't know. I mean, I know Cameron Meredith is coming in there, but they had Willie Snead, who's basically the same thing, and he didn't do much. And I think it's going to be Michael Thomas, and Ginn will stretch the field, and that's who Breeze loves. And until Meredith earns that respect and that look, I think Ginn will continue to put up. Again, he'll be good enough, but again, wide receiver 3 in consistency for a guy that everybody thinks is just a one-hit wonder from week to week. You may want to think twice. All right, so we've come to the end. Man, it's went fast. Holy cow. These hours go quick. And we don't even run commercials.
No, we love us some wide receivers.
We do. But we will run this commercial. We will just talk about, again, Big Guy Fantasy Sports. If you're new to consistency in fantasy football, welcome. If you need some more guidance, need some more help, you can get the 2018 Fantasy Football Consistency Guide on Amazon. You can get that. It's supposed to be $9.99, but I've seen it on sale, which I didn't choose to put on sale, but they did, and that's fine. But anyway, you can get it out there anywhere. It's, depending on when you get it, it could be $8.99 to $9.99, but still a fair deal. You can come to the website, upgrade to the VIP for the rest of the season for only $10 more, have all access to all consistency. Email me questions, Ron questions about DFS and consistency. We'll be more than happy to help you out. You can get all of that right there at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Ron, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you and some of your stuff, including baseball and football.
Well, real quick, I don't care what we charge for the guide. In my eyes, it's a bargain at twice the price, no matter what the price is. So
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so, tonight, later on, myself, Nate Dawkin, and Van Lee will be recording a couple of episodes. We're taking a week off from the Nasty Cast because of the 4th of July. We're going to be looking at a couple of top 100 prospect lists. And it's actually our 50th episode of the show as well, so that's pretty cool. And so you'll see me over at Fantistics. I'll be doing the July 6th player profiles from the night before, so get that to check out who did what the night before, who the big performers were on your team. I'm going to be throwing together some my bye week stuff here for Bob over at Big Guy Fantasy Sports, so that way when you draft Ezekiel Elliott, you know who you're going to get in your bye weeks. It's going to help you out later on in your draft. So quite a few things in the hopper going on, and that's always a good thing, especially this time of year.
Absolutely. You can find me at Big Guy Fantasy Sports. Find me on Twitter at Bob_Lung. Did you tell him to find you on Twitter at The Real Made?
No, but you did, so that's perfect.
I just did. Okay, good. So you can find all of us there as well. One thing I did want to mention, I know we're a little bit over, but we don't get cut off like you do on those other sites. But there is something really big coming up, and the sad part is you folks don't get to attend it live. But let's explain some things too. What's going to happen? So there is a very, very cool fantasy expert draft coming up Saturday, August 18th at the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. We are bringing in all of the biggest sites and names across the country, NFL.com, Yahoo, Brad Evans, Mike Clay from ESPN, Dave Ricard from CBS Sports. I could go on and on. But even bigger is the fact that myself will be there attending. Ron will be there attending, representing Fantistics. And our good friend Colby Conway from Fantasy Alarm will be representing Fantasy Alarm in Howard Bender's spot. So all three of us will be there. It will be a great event. If you happen to live anywhere near Canton, certainly come over. You can visit the Hall of Fame that day. If you haven't been here in a while, check it out. And while you're there, let us know you're there, and we'll try to say hi to you. We'll be upstairs in the Gold Jacket Lounge doing the drafts all day. It will be live on Sirius Radio, both of the drafts, the auction and the snake drafts. And there's going to be about 24 experts, 2 different leagues. And it's called the King's X Classic. King's X happened to be the bar in Oakland. In 1969, where the first documented fantasy draft for football was ever held by some representatives, some employees of the Raiders. And they still have the form that they filled out that day. It was just a sheet of paper. And they have a trophy still that they made up for that. So I said we should move that into the Hall of Fame for that weekend. That would be very cool. But so we're going to name it after that in their honor. We're having a charity portion of it that half of the league fees are going to go to the NFL Player Cares Association, which helps veterans with medical and various other things that, may have played years ago and just need some help. So great event. Excited about Ron and Colby being able to attend. And Ron, any last thoughts on the fact that you get to come to Canton and visit me? That's even better.
Yeah, I'm stoked, man. Stoked to finally hang out with the legend Bob Lung and be at the Hall of Fame. I've only got to do the Hall of Fame one other time before, but to be there, to not only get to maybe do a tour again, but to do something like this with all the heavy hitters that we're bringing in, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Anytime I can devote a week to travel or a weekend to travel and getting out of town and going somewhere like that for fantasy football, it's always a great thing, and I'm honored to be a part of it, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, we're excited to put it on, and the Hall of Fame is excited to have everybody come there and make it as the Hall of Fame weekend used to always be called, the football's greatest weekend. We're going to create fantasy football's greatest weekend. So looking forward to that. So everybody kind of keep that on your calendar, especially if you have Sirius Radio, you can listen to it live. If not, if you live close, come on down and check it out and say hi to us if you get a chance. So, all right, for Ron Rigney, I'm Bob Lung. Thanks again for being a part of our show and listening to the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. We'll talk to you guys next week. Happy 4th.